I'm Rebecca Morgan, 32 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed I'd lost both my father and any connection to my childhood home. My brother Jason spent years reminding me that I'd walked away from my birthright and that everything would be his when Dad passed. The smug look on his face at the funeral still burns in my memory. But when we sat down in that lawyer's office, everything changed in ways neither of us expected. Before I dive into how my world turned upside down, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to deal with family members who thought they were entitled to everything. Growing up in the Morgan household was complicated. From the outside, we had everything: the sprawling colonial home in the best neighborhood in Hartford, Connecticut, private schools, and summer vacations in the Hamptons. My father, Richard Morgan, had built Morgan Developments from nothing into one of the most respected real estate development companies in New England. He worked constantly but always made time for family dinners and weekend outings. Our mother, Elizabeth, was the heart of our home, warm, creative, and the perfect balance to Dad's driven personality. She was the one who noticed my interest in interior design when I was just 8 years old, letting me rearrange my bedroom furniture weekly and giving me a small budget to redecorate our guest room when I turned 12. But our picture-perfect family shattered when Mom died suddenly from an aneurysm when I was 15 and Jason was 12. The loss devastated all of us, but it transformed our family dynamic in ways that would echo for decades. Dad buried himself in work, and I, as the older sibling, stepped into a caretaker role far too young. Jason handled his grief differently. He became withdrawn, then angry, then manipulative. Dad, consumed by his own grief and guilt about being an absent father, began indulging Jason's every whim. New video games, a car at 16, unlimited spending money, nothing was off limits. I watched my little brother transform from a sweet kid into an entitled teenager who believed the world owed him everything. "He's just processing his grief," Dad would say when I expressed concern about Jason's behavior. "He needs extra support right now." While Jason was being spoiled, I was taking on more responsibilities at home. I cooked dinners, helped Jason with homework, and even started attending business events with Dad when he realized I had a genuine interest in Morgan Developments. "You've got the Morgan business instinct," Dad told me once after I'd helped him brainstorm solutions for a challenging development project. It was one of the few bright spots during those difficult years, the growing bond between Dad and me through the family business. By the time I turned 18 and left for college, the pattern was set. I was the responsible one, and Jason was the favored child who could do no wrong. I studied interior design and business, dreaming of one day combining my passion with Dad's company, creating beautiful spaces in the buildings he developed. During my college years, I watched from afar as Jason graduated high school with barely passing grades and half-heartedly enrolled in the local community college. He dropped out after one semester, and Dad immediately gave him a position at Morgan Developments. "It's just until he figures out what he wants to do," Dad explained during one of our weekly phone calls. "He needs structure." That temporary position turned into years of Jason nominally working for the company while contributing little. Meanwhile, I graduated with honors, worked for several prestigious design firms to gain experience, and eventually started my own small but successful interior design business in Boston. The distance, both physical and emotional, between Jason and me grew. My visits home became increasingly uncomfortable as Jason staked his claim on everything. "When this is all mine," he'd say, gesturing around the family home during a holiday visit, "I'm going to gut this place and modernize it." It broke my heart to hear him talk about our childhood home like it was just another asset. That house held every memory of our mother, every family Christmas, every moment that made us who we were. To me, it was irreplaceable. To Jason, it was just real estate. As Dad entered his 60s, Jason's entitlement only grew worse. At a family dinner 3 years ago, when I was 29 and Jason was 26, he boldly announced, "Dad's already promised me I'll be taking over the company when he retires." "Right, Dad?" Dad, never one for confrontation, especially with Jason, simply nodded and changed the subject. The hurt I felt was profound. Not because I expected to be handed the company, I'd worked hard to build my own business and was proud of it, but because the dismissal of my connection to our family legacy was so casual. That night, Dad found me in his study, looking at old photos of Mom. "Becky," he said, using my childhood nickname, "I hope you know how proud I am of what you've built on your own." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, not looking up from the photos. "Jason needs the company," he continued, his voice heavy. "It's all he has. You've always been the strong one. The independent one." I wanted to argue, to point out that Jason only needed the company because he'd never been pushed to create anything for himself. But I stayed silent. Dad's health had been declining, and I didn't want to stress him further. Over the next few years, the pattern continued. I visited less frequently, focusing on growing my design business in Boston. Jason remained at home, supposedly learning the family business but, according to occasional comments from Dad's longtime assistant Margaret, mostly taking long lunches and claiming credit for others' work. During my rare visits home, Jason never missed an opportunity to remind me of what he considered the inevitable future. "Don't get too nostalgic about this place," he said during my last Christmas visit, as I arranged Mom's old ornaments on the tree. "Once it's mine, these old things are going into storage." The casual cruelty of his words stung, but I'd grown accustomed to it. What I couldn't know then was how completely everything was about to change. The call came on a rainy Tuesday in April. I was in the middle of a client meeting when I saw Dad's number flash on my phone. He never called during business hours unless it was important, so I excused myself to answer. "Rebecca," he said, his voice uncharacteristically small. "I need you to come home." The diagnosis was pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 6 months at most. I packed up my life in Boston within 24 hours, arranging for my assistant to handle ongoing projects and postponing new clients. By Wednesday evening, I was pulling into the driveway of our family home, my heart heavy with the knowledge that this would be the last time I'd be coming home to my father. Jason's Porsche was in the driveway, and I prepared myself for the inevitable tension. When I entered, the house felt different, quieter, as if it already knew it was becoming a place of endings rather than beginnings. Jason was in the kitchen, looking irritated as he talked on his phone. He barely acknowledged my arrival with a nod before continuing his conversation, something about golf memberships and business connections. I went straight upstairs to Dad's room. The sight of him shocked me. Just 3 months since I'd seen him at Christmas, and he'd already lost so much weight. His face was gaunt, his skin yellow-tinged from jaundice. But his eyes lit up when he saw me. "There's my girl," he said, opening his arms for a hug. I spent that first evening getting settled back into my old bedroom and talking with Dad's doctors. They had arranged for hospice care, and a nurse would be coming daily. I made notes about medications, comfort measures, and warning signs to watch for. When I came downstairs later that night to make Dad some tea, Jason was in the living room with a tumbler of scotch, Dad's expensive scotch. "So you're back," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Of course I'm back," I replied, filling the kettle. "Dad needs us." Jason scoffed. "Dad has nurses and his assistant checking in constantly. But sure, swoop in now and play the devoted daughter." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that fighting with Jason wouldn't help Dad. "I'm here to help however I can," I said evenly. "We should both be here for him." "Just don't get too comfortable," Jason replied, finally looking up at me with cold eyes. "This will all be mine soon enough. Dad and I have talked about it plenty of times." The casual cruelty of discussing inheritance while our father was dying upstairs made my stomach turn. "Is that really what you're thinking about right now?" I asked, unable to keep the disgust from my voice. "I'm being realistic," he shrugged. "Someone has to think about the future of the company, the house. Dad built all this for his legacy, and I'm the one who stayed to be part of it." The kettle whistled, saving me from responding. I prepared Dad's tea and headed back upstairs, Jason's words echoing in my head. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a routine. Mornings were spent with Dad, helping him eat breakfast and taking short walks when he felt strong enough. Afternoons, when he usually napped, I would review his medical bills, insurance paperwork, and occasionally help Margaret with pressing business matters that still needed Dad's input. It was during one of these afternoons that I discovered just how much Jason had been manipulating the business in Dad's absence. Margaret showed me contracts Jason had pushed through without proper review, deals that heavily favored his friends, and expense reports that revealed lavish business dinners that were clearly personal. "Your father doesn't know the half of it," Margaret confided. "I've tried to bring some of this to his attention, but he's been too ill, and Jason always finds a way to intercept." I was furious but uncertain how to proceed. Dad was too weak for confrontation, and challenging Jason directly would only create more stress in the house. Instead, I tried a gentler approach with Dad. One evening as I helped him sort through old photographs, a project he'd initiated to put his memories in order, I carefully broached the subject of the company's future. "Dad, have you thought about what happens to Morgan Developments after you're gone?" I asked, hating the question but needing to understand his wishes. Dad sighed, setting down a photo of the three of us at the beach, taken when Mom was still alive. "I've been thinking about it a lot, actually," he said quietly. "There's so much I should have done differently." Before he could elaborate, Jason appeared in the doorway, his face darkening when he saw us huddled together over the photos. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Just looking at old pictures," Dad replied, suddenly looking more tired. Jason's eyes narrowed. "You need to rest, Dad." "Rebecca, you shouldn't be tiring him out with all this sentimental stuff." "It was my idea," Dad interjected, but Jason was already moving into the room, collecting the scattered photos. "We can do this another time," he insisted, shooting me a warning look. That night, Jason cornered me in the hallway outside my bedroom. "I know what you're doing," he hissed. "Trying to get in his ear about the company, about the house. It won't work." "I'm not doing anything except caring for our dying father," I replied, trying to move past him. He blocked my way. "Dad always favored me. The house, the business, they're mine. You left, remember? You walked away to do your little decorating job. Don't come back now thinking you deserve anything." The venom in his voice shocked me, even knowing how entitled he'd become. "Is that really all you care about? What you'll get when Dad dies?" "He's still here, Jason. He can hear you talking like this." "Don't act so noble," he sneered. "We both know why you're really here." I pushed past him, too angry and hurt to continue the conversation. That night, I cried for the first time since returning home. Not just for Dad, but for the brother I'd lost long before. As Dad's condition deteriorated, tensions in the house only grew. I found solace in the quiet hours of early morning, sitting in Dad's study surrounded by the artifacts of his life. Photos of construction sites, awards from business associations, the framed first dollar from Morgan Developments. Sometimes I'd find small surprises, notes from my mother tucked into books, old drawings Jason and I had made as children, a pressed flower from my high school graduation corsage. These discoveries made me realize how sentimental Dad actually was beneath his business-focused exterior. It made Jason's dismissal of these family treasures as old things even more painful. One morning, about 2 months after I'd returned home, I found Dad awake unusually early, sitting up in bed and looking out the window. "The sunrise," he said when he noticed me in the doorway. I never took enough time to watch it. Always rushing to the office. I sat beside him, and we watched the sky turn from gray to pink to golden in comfortable silence. "Rebecca," he said finally, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "I need you to know something. I've made arrangements for after. Things that Jason doesn't know about." My heart raced. "Dad, what do you mean?" "I've been unfair to you both, in different ways," he continued. "Letting Jason believe, well, it doesn't matter now. I've spoken with Peterson." Mr. Peterson was Dad's longtime attorney and friend. "Just promise me," Dad said, gripping my hand with surprising strength, "that whatever happens, you'll remember that I tried to make it right in the end." Before I could ask him to explain, he was overcome by a coughing fit. The nurse came in, and the moment passed. Dad slept most of that day, and when he woke, he seemed to have forgotten their conversation entirely. A week later, Dad took a sharp turn for the worse. The hospice nurse warned us that the end was near, and I took up a constant vigil by his bedside. Jason was noticeably absent, claiming he had important business meetings he couldn't reschedule. "The company doesn't run itself," he said dismissively when I called to tell him Dad was fading fast. Dad passed away peacefully on a Sunday morning, with me holding his hand and Jason rushing in 20 minutes too late, still wearing golf clothes. The days following Dad's death passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, phone calls, and a deep, hollow grief that made even the simplest tasks feel overwhelming. Jason, seemingly recovered from missing Dad's final moments, immediately took charge of the funeral preparations. Dad and I discussed what he wanted, he insisted, overruling my suggestions at every turn. A small, private service. Only business associates and close friends. I knew this wasn't true. Dad had always talked about being laid to rest next to Mom in a service that celebrated his life rather than mourned his death. But fighting with Jason felt disrespectful to Dad's memory, so I focused on the things I could control: writing the obituary, selecting photos for the memorial display, and helping Margaret notify Dad's oldest friends and colleagues. The funeral home was filled to capacity on the day of the service. Jason had been forced to concede that Dad's impact extended far beyond his small circle, as people from every phase of his life came to pay their respects. Former employees, business partners, charity organizations he'd supported, even the barista from his favorite coffee shop, all came to honor the man who had touched their lives. Throughout the service, I noticed several of Dad's business associates giving me curious looks. One of them, Mr. Donnelly, who had been Dad's first investor, approached me during the reception. "Rebecca, I was surprised to see you here," he said, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean, it's wonderful that you could come back for your father." His comment confused me. Of course I'd be here. I moved back months ago to care for him. Mr. Donnelly's eyebrows rose. "Oh, I didn't realize. Jason mentioned you were too busy with your business in Boston to be involved with family matters." A cold realization washed over me. What else has Jason been saying? The older man shifted uncomfortably. Nothing of consequence. Just that your father had finalized his succession plans and that Jason would be taking over everything. He's been telling everyone for months that he's the new CEO, effective immediately after your father's passing. I thanked Mr. Donnelly and moved away, needing space to process this information. As I circulated through the reception, I caught fragments of similar conversations. Jason had apparently been laying groundwork for months, telling everyone who would listen that he was the sole heir to everything our father had built. The most painful moment came when I overheard Jason speaking to a group of Dad's younger business associates near the bar. "It'll be a smooth transition," he was saying confidently. "Dad and I have been working on the succession plan for years. The company won't skip a beat." He lowered his voice, but not enough. "Rebecca left years ago to do interior decorating or whatever. She's never been interested in the family business." The casual dismissal of both my career and my relationship with Dad stung deeply. I wanted to confront him, to correct the narrative he was spinning, but this wasn't the time or place. Dad deserved better than a scene at his funeral. Instead, I found a quiet corner with Margaret, who had been Dad's assistant for over 20 years and knew more about Morgan developments than anyone except Dad himself. "Has Jason really been telling everyone he's taking over?" I asked her. Margaret's expression was a mixture of sympathy and discomfort. "4 months now. Your father was too ill to attend board meetings toward the end, and Jason started presenting himself as the de facto leader." "And the board accepted this?" "Some did, some didn't," she replied carefully. "But without your father there to correct him." She trailed off, then added, "Rebecca, there's something you should know. Your father made some changes in the last few months. He asked me not to discuss them, but you'll find out tomorrow at the reading of the will." Before I could press her for details, Jason appeared, slipping his arm around my shoulders in a show of sibling unity that felt entirely false. "There you are, sis," he said, his voice overly warm for the benefit of those nearby. "Peterson wants to meet with us tomorrow at 10 to go over Dad's will. Just a formality, of course, but we need to do things properly." The way he emphasized formality made it clear he believed the outcome was predetermined. I simply nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As people began to leave, Jason caught my arm. "I'll need you to clear out your things from the house by the end of the week," he said quietly. "Brittany and I will be moving in, and she has big renovation plans." Brittany was his girlfriend of 3 months, a woman who had visited Dad exactly once during his illness and had spent the entire time commenting on how outdated the house was. "The will hasn't even been read yet," I replied, pulling my arm free. Jason laughed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Rebecca. We both know how this ends." As I watched him walk away to join Brittany, who was already discussing paint colors with an interior designer she'd brought to the funeral, I wondered if he could possibly be right. Had Dad really left everything to Jason, despite knowing how little he valued the family legacy? I spent that night alone in the family home, walking through rooms filled with memories, wondering if it would be my last night there. Despite Jason's certainty, something about Margaret's cryptic comment gave me hope that perhaps Dad had seen more clearly than I'd given him credit for. Tomorrow at the lawyer's office, I would finally learn the truth. Mr. Peterson's law office occupied the top floor of one of the buildings Dad had developed in downtown Hartford. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a view Dad had been particularly proud of. I arrived 15 minutes early, taking a moment to compose myself before the meeting. Mr. Peterson greeted me warmly. In his 70s now, he had been Dad's attorney and friend since they were both young men starting their careers. His kind eyes crinkled with genuine sympathy as he shook my hand. "Rebecca, thank you for coming. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied honestly. "It still doesn't feel real." He nodded understanding. "Your father was very proud of you, you know. He kept a portfolio of all your design projects in his desk drawer." This small revelation brought fresh tears to my eyes. Dad had never mentioned following my career so closely. Before I could respond, Jason arrived with Brittany in tow. He was dressed in one of Dad's old suits, a detail that felt both calculating and disrespectful. Brittany wore a tight black dress more appropriate for a cocktail party than a will reading, already looking like she was playing the role of company wife. "Peterson," Jason said with a nod, not bothering with the mister that Dad had always used out of respect. "Let's get this underway. I have a meeting with the board at noon to discuss the transition." Mr. Peterson's expression revealed nothing as he gestured for us to sit. "I wasn't aware Brittany would be joining us," he noted mildly. "She's family now," Jason replied dismissively. I noticed he was carrying a leather briefcase embossed with Dad's initials, another item he'd apparently already claimed. "Very well," the lawyer said, opening a thick folder. "Before we begin the formal reading, Richard left video messages for both of you. He recorded these about 2 months before his passing." This was unexpected. Jason shifted impatiently. "Can we just get to the important parts? The videos can wait." "Your father was very specific about the order of proceedings," Mr. Peterson replied firmly. "The videos come first." He pressed a button on a remote, and the large screen on the wall flickered to life. Dad appeared, looking gaunt but alert, sitting in his study at home. "Hello, my children," he began, his voice stronger than it had been in his final weeks. "If you're watching this, then I've moved on to join your mother, which brings me both sadness and comfort." He paused, collecting himself. "I want you both to know how much I love you. You were the greatest joys of my life, and I'm so proud of the adults you've become, each in your own way." I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. Beside me, Jason checked his watch. "I know there have been tensions between you," Dad continued. "Some of that is my fault. After your mother died, I didn't handle things well. Rebecca, you stepped up and took on responsibilities no teenager should have to bear. Jason, I tried to shield you from pain by giving you everything, which I now realize was no gift at all. Jason's head snapped up at that, his expression darkening. I've made arrangements for my estate that may surprise you both. Please know that every decision was made with careful thought and with your best interests at heart, not just what you want, but what you need. The video ended, and Mr. Peterson gave us a moment to collect ourselves. Jason recovered first. Well, that was touching, he said, his voice tinged with sarcasm. Now, the actual will? Mr. Peterson nodded and began reading through the standard legal preamble. I barely heard the words, still processing Dad's message. What had he meant about arrangements that would surprise us? First, regarding personal effects, Mr. Peterson continued. To Rebecca Morgan, I leave all family heirlooms, photo albums, and personal mementos, including your mother's jewelry collection and artwork. I nodded, tears threatening again. Mom's jewelry wasn't particularly valuable in monetary terms, but it held priceless sentimental value for me. To Jason Morgan, I leave my collection of watches, my golf clubs, and personal sports memorabilia. Jason frowned slightly. These were items he'd already been using for years, acting as if they were his own. Being officially bequeathed them seemed to diminish their value in his eyes. Rebecca gets the trinkets. No surprise there, he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Mr. Peterson continued methodically through smaller bequests, gifts to longtime employees, donations to charities, and specific items to friends. Jason grew increasingly restless, tapping his pen against the table and exchanging impatient glances with Brittany, who was already scrolling through interior design websites on her phone. And now, regarding Morgan Developments and the family home at 47 Oakwood Drive, Mr. Peterson finally said, looking up from the document. Jason straightened in his chair, setting down his pen and giving the lawyer his full attention for the first time. I felt my heart racing, preparing myself for the confirmation of what Jason had been telling everyone, that he was inheriting everything. Richard Morgan has established a detailed succession plan for both properties, Mr. Peterson continued. Jason smiled smugly, typing something on his phone, presumably messaging the board members about his imminent leadership. The family home at 47 Oakwood Drive, along with all its contents not otherwise specifically bequeathed, is left to Rebecca Morgan. The words hung in the air for a moment before registering. The house was mine? I gasped audibly, while Jason's phone clattered to the table. That's impossible, he sputtered, face flushing red. There must be some mistake. Mr. Peterson continued as if he hadn't heard the interruption. In Richard's words, I leave our family home to Rebecca, who has always appreciated its true value beyond its market price. The memories of our family are embedded in those walls, and I know she will honor them. Jason was on his feet now. This is ridiculous. Dad promised me the house. We've been planning renovations for months. Please sit down, Mr. Morgan, Peterson said calmly. We still have the matter of the company to address. Jason sank back into his chair, shooting me a venomous look as if this were somehow my doing. Brittany was frantically whispering in his ear, her plans for gutting the family home evaporating before her eyes. Regarding Morgan Developments, Mr. Peterson continued, Richard has established a trust with very specific conditions. The attorney laid out the details methodically. Morgan Developments would be placed in trust and managed by the current executive team for a period of 1 year. During that time, either Jason or I could qualify to take over leadership by completing a comprehensive business training program designed by Dad and demonstrating the necessary skills to lead the company. If neither of you qualifies within the 1-year period, Peterson explained, the company will be sold and the proceeds divided equally between you. Jason's face had progressed from red to purple. This is insane. I've been working at the company for years. I'm already qualified. Your father left another video addressing this specific point, Mr. Peterson said, pressing the remote again. Dad appeared on screen once more, looking directly at the camera with an intensity one recognized from business negotiations. Jason and Rebecca, he began, I know this arrangement may come as a shock, particularly to Jason, who has been operating under certain assumptions about his future role. Jason muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. Jason, son, I need to be direct with you. While you have held a position at Morgan Developments for several years, you have not demonstrated the work ethic, business acumen, or leadership skills necessary to take over as CEO. I've been aware of your extended lunches, your attempts to take credit for others' work, and most concerning, your recent efforts to push through deals that would benefit your friends at the company's expense. Jason's face drained of color. Rebecca, though you chose a different path, one I deeply respect, you have built a successful business from the ground up. You've shown the determination, creativity, and integrity that Morgan Developments was founded upon. Dad sighed deeply before continuing. I don't wish to dictate either of your futures. Rebecca, you may be content with your design firm and have no interest in taking over the family business. Jason, you may be capable of more than you've shown thus far, if given proper guidance and motivation. He leaned closer to the camera. This is why I've established this challenge. The company will be held in trust for 1 year. During that time, either or both of you may undertake the training program I've designed with the help of business colleagues I trust. At the end of that period, those same colleagues will evaluate your performance and determine if either of you is ready to lead Morgan Developments into the future. Dad's expression softened. I hope you both understand that this decision comes from love. Rebecca, you deserve the chance to be part of the family legacy if you want it. Jason, you deserve the chance to earn what you've always assumed would be handed to you. The video ended, leaving a heavy silence in the conference room. I sat stunned, unable to process everything I'd just heard. The house was mine. The company was, potentially mine, if I wanted it and could prove myself capable. Jason broke the silence by slamming his hand on the table. This is bull, he spat. I'm contesting the will. Dad wasn't in his right mind when he made these changes. Mr. Peterson didn't seem surprised by this reaction. You're within your rights to contest, of course. However, I should inform you that your father anticipated this response. We have extensive documentation of his mental competence, including evaluations from 3 separate physicians conducted specifically for this purpose. Additionally, these changes weren't made in the final days of his illness, they were implemented over 4 months ago, with careful consideration and multiple discussions between your father and myself. Jason turned to me, eyes blazing. You did this. You manipulated him when he was weak. I didn't know anything about this, I replied honestly, still trying to absorb everything I'd learned. Ms. Morgan is telling the truth, Peterson interjected. Your father was explicit that neither of you should know about these arrangements until after his passing. Jason grabbed his briefcase, Dad's briefcase, and stood abruptly. This isn't over. I'll be calling my own attorney this afternoon. He pulled Brittany to her feet. Let's go. They stormed out, leaving me alone with Mr. Peterson and a future I hadn't imagined possible. He's serious about contesting, I said quietly. The older man nodded. Yes, but he won't succeed. Your father was very thorough. He passed me a thick envelope. Richard asked me to give you this privately. It's a letter explaining his decisions in more detail. As I took the envelope, the weight of everything that had happened settled on me. I had inherited the family home I'd always loved. I had the opportunity to be part of Dad's business legacy. But I'd also lost what little relationship remained with my brother, and the road ahead would be far from easy. What happens now? I asked. That, Mr. Peterson said kindly, is entirely up to you. The heavy oak door of the conference room slammed so hard behind Jason that the framed certificates on Mr. Peterson's wall rattled. For a moment, neither the lawyer nor I spoke, both processing the explosive end to what should have been a solemn occasion. I'm sorry about that, I finally said, feeling oddly responsible for my brother's behavior. Mr. Peterson shook his head. No need to apologize. Your father anticipated Jason's reaction quite accurately. In fact, He rifled through his papers and pulled out another envelope. Richard left specific instructions about what to share with you privately after Jason's inevitable departure. My mind was still reeling from everything I'd learned. The family home was mine. The company could be mine too, if I completed Dad's training program and proved myself worthy. It was so far from what I'd expected that I was having trouble processing it all. "May I get you some water?" the lawyer asked, noting my overwhelmed expression. I nodded gratefully, and he stepped out momentarily. Left alone, I opened the envelope he'd handed me earlier, pulling out several handwritten pages in Dad's distinctive script. "My dearest Rebecca *. If you're reading this, then Peterson has explained my decisions regarding the estate, and Jason has likely stormed out in anger. I wish I could have spared you that scene, but some lessons can only be learned through difficult truths *. You're probably wondering why I kept these plans secret, even during those final months when you were caring for me so devotedly. The truth is complicated, as truth often is *. For years, I allowed Jason to believe he would inherit everything. This was my greatest failure as a father, not just to him, but to you as well. I convinced myself I was protecting him, making up for the loss of his mother at such a young age. In reality, I was creating an entitled young man with no understanding of work, value, or legacy *. I realized my mistake too late, when my diagnosis forced me to confront the reality of what would happen after I was gone. Jason lacks the character and work ethic to steward what I built. He sees Morgan Developments as nothing but a cash machine and status symbol. The thought of him dismantling everything through incompetence or greed became unbearable *. You, on the other hand, have always understood what truly matters. You built your own business from nothing, just as I did. You value our family history and the memories our home contains. You have your mother's compassion and my determination, without either of our flaws *. I've watched your design business grow from afar, prouder than you can imagine. Did you know I have a file of every project you've ever worked on? Margaret helped me collect articles, photos, client testimonials, anything that featured your work. The talent you've shown, the integrity with which you've built your reputation. These are the qualities Morgan Developments needs *. The training program I've designed isn't meant to be an obstacle for you, but rather a bridge back to the family business, should you want it. I've arranged for you to work with my most trusted mentors and colleagues, people who can teach you the specific aspects of development that differ from your current work *. If you choose not to pursue this path, I understand completely. The house is yours regardless, a thank you for being the daughter any father would be proud of, and for caring for me until the end *. As for Jason, I hope this serves as the wake-up call he desperately needs. The possibility of losing his anticipated inheritance might finally motivate him to earn what he's always expected to be given. The training program is as much for his benefit as for the company's future *. I'm sorry for putting you in this difficult position with your brother. I hope someday he'll understand that this was an act of love, not punishment. And I hope you'll forgive me for not being brave enough to have this conversation while I was still with you *. All my love *. Dad *. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. The letter confirmed what I had begun to suspect during Dad's final weeks, that he had seen and understood far more than he let on. He hadn't been oblivious to Jason's manipulation or to my own quiet contributions. Mr. Peterson returned with water and gave me a moment to compose myself. "Your father was a wise man," he said gently. "He knew this would be difficult for everyone." "Did he really think Jason would accept this?" I asked, dabbing at my eyes. "He hoped Jason would rise to the challenge, but he wasn't naive," Peterson replied. Which brings me to the second envelope. He handed me another document, this one sealed with the Morgan Developments logo. This contains the full details of the training program and evaluation criteria. Richard was very specific about what skills and knowledge would be required to take over the company. As I skimmed the contents, I was impressed by the comprehensive nature of the program. It covered everything from the financial and legal aspects of real estate development to leadership training and sustainable building practices. Dad had created a miniature MBA program specifically tailored to Morgan developments. This is a lot, I said, feeling both intimidated and intrigued. It is, Peterson agreed. But Richard believed you were more than capable. He also left you this. He slid a thumb drive across the table. This contains all the company's financial records for the past 5 years, including the problematic decisions Jason has been making recently. Richard wanted you to have a clear picture of what you'd be taking on. I stared at the small device, understanding the magnitude of what it represented. Does Jason know about this? No. Your father was concerned that if Jason knew the extent of the documentation, he might try to alter records or pressure employees to support his version of events. The revelation that Dad had been quietly gathering evidence of Jason's mismanagement while appearing to be an oblivious, doting father was stunning. How long had he been planning this? When did Dad start making these arrangements? I asked. The first changes to his will came about 8 months ago, Peterson explained. Shortly after that board meeting where Jason presented himself as the heir apparent without your father's authorization. But Richard had been expressing concerns to me privately for over 2 years. 8 months ago, 2 months before Dad's diagnosis. This hadn't been a deathbed decision spurred by medication or fear. Dad had begun this process while still in relatively good health, with clear intentions and a sound mind. Jason doesn't stand a chance contesting this, does he? I realized. No, Peterson confirmed. Your father made absolutely certain of that. Every document is in order, every medical evaluation conclusive, every witness credible. Jason will waste money on legal fees, but the outcome is predetermined. For the first time since the reading began, I felt something close to relief. Dad had seen the truth and acted on it, protecting both his legacy and, in his own way, trying to protect Jason from himself. There's one more thing you should know, Peterson said, his expression becoming even more serious. In the process of documenting Jason's activities at the company, we discovered some truly concerning transactions. Nothing definitively illegal yet, but heading in that direction. Vendor kickbacks, misleading financial reports to the board, using company resources for personal expenses beyond what was authorized. My stomach dropped. That sounds like fraud. It's in a gray area legally, but ethically, it's quite clear, Peterson agreed. Richard hoped that this wake-up call would pull Jason back from that edge before he crossed into territory that couldn't be undone. The training program isn't just about business skills, it's about ethics and integrity as well. I sat back, absorbing everything. In the span of an hour, my understanding of the past several years had been completely rewritten. Dad hadn't been oblivious or unfair, he'd been playing a long game, watching and waiting and finally acting to protect everything he valued. What happens now? I asked for the second time. That depends on what you want, Peterson replied. The house is yours immediately. As for the company, you have a choice to make. Do you want to undertake the training program? Or would you prefer to let the company be sold after the 1-year period? It was a question I never expected to face. I had built my own business, established my own identity separate from the Morgan name. Did I want to step back into the family legacy now? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I glanced down and felt my blood run cold. This isn't over. Dad built that company for me. You'll regret stealing what's mine. J**. As if on cue, Peterson's phone rang. His secretary's voice came through clearly in the quiet room. Mr. Peterson, there's a Mr. Jason Morgan on line 1, calling from his attorney's office. He's demanding immediate access to all company records and his father's medical files. Peterson sighed. Tell him I'll call him back this afternoon. He ended the call and looked at me sympathetically. This is just the beginning, I'm afraid. Jason won't accept this easily. I stared at the threatening text on my phone, then at the training program outline, and finally at Dad's letter. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt connected to my father and his legacy in a way I'd thought was lost forever. I need some time to think, I told Peterson. But I'm not afraid of Jason's threats. Dad trusted me with this responsibility, and I won't let him down, whatever I decide. As I gathered my things to leave, a strange sense of peace settled over me despite the turmoil ahead. Dad had seen me clearly all along, even when I thought he didn't. And now, through his final acts, he had given me back a part of my heritage I'd thought was lost forever. I stepped out of the law office into the bright sunlight, the keys to my childhood home heavy in my pocket, and the future, uncertain but full of possibility, stretching before me. The drive back to the family home, my home now, was surreal. Traffic lights, other cars, pedestrians all seemed distant and unimportant compared to the thoughts swirling through my mind. Jason's threat lingered, but beneath the anger in his message, I sensed fear. For the first time in his adult life, something he had taken for granted had been pulled out from under him. I pulled into the driveway, half expecting to find the locks changed despite the fact that legally, the house was now mine. Instead, I found the front door slightly ajar. Cautiously, I stepped inside to find Jason in Dad's study, rifling through drawers and filing cabinets. "What are you doing?" I demanded, anger flaring instantly. He barely looked up. "Taking what's mine before you change the locks. This is still Dad's house, my house now. You can't just take things." "Watch me," he replied, stuffing a folder into his briefcase, the same one he'd brought to the will reading, the one with Dad's initials. I stepped forward and grabbed the edge of the folder. "Put it back, Jason." For a moment, I thought he might push me or worse. His face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before, even during our worst arguments. Then, abruptly, he let go of the folder, sending me stumbling backward. "Keep your precious papers," he sneered. "My lawyer says Dad's medical records will prove he wasn't competent when he made those changes. This whole farce will be overturned within weeks. Dad wasn't on heavy medication 8 months ago when he started changing his will," I countered. "He was of sound mind, and you know it." Jason's confidence faltered for just a second before his mask of arrogance returned. "We'll see what a judge has to say about that. In the meantime, I'll be taking my personal belongings." He brushed past me, heading upstairs. I considered stopping him but decided it wasn't worth the confrontation. Let him take his clothes and personal items, those weren't what mattered. When he finally left an hour later, his Porsche loaded with boxes, the house felt both emptier and more peaceful. I wandered from room to room, running my fingers along the familiar surfaces. The banister Mom had insisted on keeping despite Dad's desire to modernize, the doorframe in the kitchen with pencil marks tracking our heights throughout childhood, the small dent in the living room wall from when Jason had thrown a baseball indoors despite repeated warnings not to. Each room held memories, some beautiful, some painful, all part of what made this house a home. I ended my tour in Dad's study, where the scattered contents of drawers and files still lay where Jason had left them. As I began putting things back in order, I discovered items Jason had overlooked in his haste. Tucked in the back of a drawer was a leather-bound album I'd never seen before. Opening it, I gasped. Inside were photos, newspaper clippings, and printed web pages, all featuring my design projects over the years. Dad had created a scrapbook of my career, meticulously cataloging every mention in design magazines, every client testimonial he could find online, even photos of completed projects that could only have come from my company's website. The most recent edition was from just 2 months before his death, a small feature in Boston Home magazine about a historic renovation I'd completed. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the extent of Dad's pride in my work. All those years I'd thought he was dismissive of my career choice, he'd been silently following every step of my journey. Beneath the album was a sealed envelope with my name written in Dad's handwriting. Inside was a letter, different from the one Peterson had given me. Rebecca**. If you're reading this, you've found my collection of your remarkable work. I hope it shows you what I was too proud and stubborn to say often enough. I have always been incredibly proud of you and the path you've chosen**. When you first told me you wanted to study design instead of business, I was disappointed, not because I thought less of your choice, but because I selfishly wanted you by my side at Morgan Developments. I convinced myself that Jason would fill that role, despite all evidence to the contrary. Over the years, I've watched you build something beautiful on your own terms. Your eye for design, your business savvy, your integrity with clients, you've created success your own way, just as I did decades ago. I know you think I favored Jason, and in some ways, perhaps I did. I gave him everything he asked for, while pushing you to stand on your own. The truth is, I knew you were stronger. I knew you would succeed with or without my help. Jason. I failed him by never demanding more. Whatever you decide about the company, know that I am deeply proud of the woman and the professional you've become. Your mother would be too. All my love. Dad. I clutched the letter to my chest, overcome. All these years, I'd misinterpreted Dad's actions so completely. What I'd seen as favoritism toward Jason had been, in Dad's mind, confidence in my abilities and doubt in my brother's. The revelation was both healing and heartbreaking. Dad and I had wasted so many years with this misunderstanding between us, years we could never get back. The following days passed in a blur of activity. I contacted a locksmith to change the locks, not out of pettiness but genuine concern about what Jason might do. I met with Margaret to better understand the current state of Morgan Developments and the challenges it faced. Your father was worried about the company's direction under Jason's influence, she confided during our meeting in Dad's home office. Several questionable deals were pushed through when your father was too ill to properly review them. How bad is it? I asked. Not irreparable, she assured me, but concerning. The company's reputation for ethical business practices was your father's proudest achievement. These recent deals threaten that legacy. As she walked me through the details, I began to understand why Dad had created the training program and evaluation period. It wasn't just about determining who had the skills to lead, it was about ensuring whoever took over would uphold the values the company was built on. Meanwhile, Jason was making good on his threat to contest the will. His lawyer sent a formal notice challenging Dad's mental competence, despite Mr. Peterson's warnings about the extensive documentation proving otherwise. It's a delay tactic, Peterson explained when I called him in a panic. He's hoping to drain enough of the estate's resources in legal fees that you'll agree to a settlement. I won't, I said firmly. This isn't about money. It's about respecting Dad's wishes. I know, the lawyer replied gently. And we'll prevail in court. But you should be prepared for an ugly fight. Jason didn't limit his attacks to the legal arena. I began hearing from family friends and business associates who'd received calls or emails from him, claiming I had manipulated our dying father and stolen his inheritance. Some believed him, others didn't, but the damage to relationships was painful regardless. Through it all, I was trying to decide whether to undertake Dad's training program. My design business in Boston needed attention. I'd been away for months during Dad's illness, and while my assistant had kept things running, clients were asking when I'd return full-time. Could I balance both? Did I even want to take over Morgan Developments, or would selling it after the trust period be the better choice? The decision crystallized unexpectedly during a visit to my design studio in Boston. I'd driven down for the day to check in with my team and review ongoing projects. Everything was running smoothly, almost too smoothly. My talented staff had stepped up in my absence, demonstrating that the business could function without my daily presence. As I was preparing to leave, I noticed a small card on my desk. It was from Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly client whose century-old Victorian home I'd restored the previous year. Dear Rebecca *. I wanted you to know that every morning when I come downstairs and see the beautiful space you've created, I feel my husband's presence. Though he never got to see the renovation completed, I know he would have loved how you preserved the history while making it livable for an old woman like me. You didn't just redesign a house, you helped me turn grief into something beautiful. Thank you for understanding that a home is more than just walls and furnishings *. Warmly *. Eleanor Abernathy *. I sat back, struck by the parallels to my own situation. Dad had left me our family home because he knew I understood its value beyond the real estate price. And Morgan Developments, at its best, wasn't just about constructing buildings, it was about creating spaces for people to live, work, and thrive. My design business and Dad's development company weren't as different as I'd always thought. Both were about understanding how physical spaces affect human lives and emotions. Both required creativity, business acumen, and integrity. On the drive back to Hartford, I made my decision. I would take on Dad's challenge. I would complete the training program while restructuring my design business to run with less of my direct involvement. If I qualified to take over Morgan Developments, I would find a way to merge both passions, perhaps focusing the company more on thoughtfully designed developments that emphasized quality of life, not just profit margins. The next morning, I called Mr. Peterson to formally accept the training program. "I'm in," I told him. "I want to honor Dad's legacy properly." "He would be pleased," Peterson replied. "I'll notify the trustees and the training coordinators. You'll start next week." My next call was to Jason. It went to voicemail, as expected. "Jason, it's Rebecca. I'm going to undertake Dad's training program for Morgan Developments. I'm offering you the same opportunity to participate, as Dad intended. This doesn't have to be a war between us. We could both learn from this experience, maybe even run the company together someday. Please call me back." He never did. Instead, his lawyer filed additional motions contesting the will, and I heard from a cousin that he was telling family members I'd broken into the house and changed the locks illegally. Despite the ongoing conflict, I threw myself into the training program with determination. The curriculum Dad had designed was rigorous: financial analysis, project management, sustainable building practices, leadership development, and more. I worked with mentors from every department of Morgan Developments, learning the business from the ground up just as Dad had intended. To my surprise, I discovered I had a natural aptitude for development work. My design background gave me unique insights into project planning, and my experience running my own business had equipped me with many of the skills needed to understand Morgan Development's operations. 3 months into the program, I had a breakthrough moment during a project review. The development team was discussing a troubled mixed-use project that had stalled due to community opposition. The original plans had been pushed through during Dad's illness, one of Jason's special projects that prioritized maximum profit over neighborhood integration. "What if we redesigned the street level entirely?" I suggested, sketching quickly on a notepad. "Instead of high-end retail that the neighborhood can't afford, we create a community marketplace with flexible spaces local entrepreneurs could lease affordably. We'd make less on rent, but we'd gain community support and probably speed up approval for the residential units above, which is where the real profit comes from anyway." The room fell silent, then the project manager smiled. "That's exactly the kind of solution your father would have proposed. It balances profit with purpose." For the first time, I felt not just that I could lead Morgan Developments, but that perhaps I should. The company needed someone who understood both the business and human sides of development, someone who could honor Dad's legacy while bringing fresh perspectives. That evening, as I sat in Dad's study, my study now, reviewing project files, I received an unexpected visit. Margaret appeared at the door, looking uncomfortable. "Rebecca, there's something you should see." She handed me a USB drive. "Jason came to the office today while you were in meetings. He tried to access the server and copy files. When IT stopped him, he made a scene, claiming he was still an employee and had every right to company information." "Is that what's on the drive?" I asked. She shook her head. "No. This is security footage from the last few months before your father became too ill to come to the office. I didn't show it to your father because I was afraid it would break his heart. But you need to see it." After she left, I plugged in the drive with trembling hands. The video showed Jason in Dad's office after hours, going through his files, taking photos of documents with his phone, and in one particularly disturbing clip, practicing Dad's signature on a blank letterhead. I felt physically ill. This went beyond entitlement or poor work ethic, this was deliberate deception. Had Dad known? Is that why he'd gathered evidence of Jason's mismanagement so meticulously? The next day brought another shock. Mr. Peterson called to inform me that Jason had been attempting to contact Morgan Development's clients, telling them the company was in a transitional period and suggesting they delay signing contracts until he was officially installed as CEO. He's actively trying to damage the company now, Peterson said gravely. The board is concerned. They're asking if you'd consider taking a more active role immediately, even before completing the full training program. The request was tempting but felt premature. I need to complete Dad's program properly, I insisted. That's what he wanted. But I can certainly be more visible to clients and partners in the meantime. As word spread that I was seriously pursuing leadership of Morgan Developments, support began to materialize from unexpected quarters. Dad's old friends and business associates reached out with encouragement. Longtime employees shared stories of Dad mentioning how much I reminded him of himself as a young entrepreneur. 6 months into the one-year trust period, Jason's legal challenges hit a decisive roadblock when the judge ruled Dad had been demonstrably competent when changing his will. The medical evaluations, witness statements, and video recordings left no room for doubt. Jason's lawyer advised him to drop the case, but he refused, continuing to drain his resources on a fight he couldn't win. I made one final attempt at reconciliation, inviting him to meet at a neutral location to discuss a potential compromise. To my surprise, he actually showed up at the restaurant we'd agreed on, though 20 minutes late and clearly unhappy to be there. "What do you want?" he asked without preamble, not bothering to remove his sunglasses. "I want peace, Jason. This constant fighting isn't what Dad would have wanted for us." He scoffed. "Don't pretend you know what Dad wanted. He spent my whole life promising me the company would be mine. Did he actually promise that? In those words? Or did you just assume it?" His silence was telling. "Jason, there's still time for you to take the training program. We could both qualify. We could run the company together, combining your experience there with my fresh perspective." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of consideration in his expression. Then his face hardened again. "I don't need training to run what's rightfully mine. And I certainly don't need to share leadership with my decorator sister who abandoned the family years ago." "I didn't abandon anyone," I said quietly. "I built something of my own, just like Dad did. That's why he respected me, even if he didn't always show it." "Right," Jason sneered. "He respected you so much he let me run things while he was sick. He was gathering evidence against you, Jason. Videos, financial records, witness statements. He knew exactly what you were doing with the company." The color drained from his face. "You're lying. I've seen the security footage of you in his office after hours. I know about the forged signatures, the deals that benefited your friends. Dad knew too. That's why he created the trust and the training program, to protect the company from you if you couldn't prove yourself worthy." Jason stood abruptly, knocking over his untouched water glass. "This conversation is over. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." As he stormed out, I felt a profound sadness. The brother I'd grown up with, the one I'd helped with homework and comforted after nightmares, was lost to me now, consumed by entitlement and anger. But I also felt a renewed determination. Dad had seen something in me that I hadn't fully recognized in myself, the potential to carry his legacy forward while infusing it with my own vision. The training program wasn't just about learning business skills. It was about accepting that I was my father's daughter in all the ways that mattered. That night, I sat on the patio of what was now truly my home, looking at the garden Mom had lovingly tended years ago. I'd begun restoring it recently, finding unexpected peace in the simple act of bringing beauty back to a neglected space. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Board meeting went well. Everyone's impressed with your progress in the program. Your father would be proud." I smiled, picturing Dad adding this moment to his scrapbook of my achievements. For the first time since his death, I felt certain I was on the right path, not just following his footsteps, but forging my own way while honoring the values he'd instilled in me. The house, the company, the future, none of it had turned out as I'd expected. But perhaps that was the greatest inheritance Dad had left me. The chance to redefine what it meant to be a Morgan and to carry forward a legacy built on more than just material success. 1 year to the day after Dad's will reading, I stood in the conference room at Morgan Developments, waiting for the trustees to deliver their final evaluation. The 12 months had passed in a blur of intensive learning, challenges, and growth, both professional and personal. I'd completed every aspect of Dad's training program, from financial analysis to leadership development. I'd worked alongside every department in the company, learning the business from the ground up just as Dad had intended. Most importantly, I'd developed my own vision for Morgan Development's future, one that honored Dad's legacy while incorporating my own values and expertise. The door opened, and Mr. Peterson entered along with the 3 trustees Dad had appointed, his oldest friend and business partner, a respected business school professor, and the company's longtime CFO. Ms. Morgan, Peterson began formally, the trustees have completed their evaluation of your performance in the training program established by your father. I held my breath, suddenly nervous despite the confidence I'd built over the past year. It is their unanimous decision that you have not only met but exceeded all the qualification requirements to lead Morgan Developments. Relief and pride washed over me. I'd done it. I'd proven myself worthy of Dad's trust. Furthermore, Peterson continued, they wish to note that your innovative approaches to several company challenges during the training period have already yielded positive results. The Riverside Project redesign, in particular, has become a model for community-engaged development that honors Richard Morgan's original vision for the company. The Riverside Project had been my proudest achievement, transforming one of Jason's problematic developments into a mixed-use space that balanced profitability with community needs. Instead of luxury condos that would have priced out longtime residents, we'd created a blend of affordable and market-rate housing with community spaces and local businesses on the ground floor. Thank you, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion I felt. What about Jason? Did he complete any portion of the program? The trustees exchanged glances. Peterson cleared his throat. Mr. Jason Morgan did not participate in the training program at all, despite multiple invitations. As such, he does not qualify for leadership consideration. I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still saddened me. Jason had been so convinced of his entitlement that he'd refused to even try to earn what he believed should be handed to him. As stipulated in Richard Morgan's will, Peterson continued, full control of Morgan Developments now transfers to you, effective immediately. The trust will be dissolved, and all company assets and operations fall under your authority as CEO. After signing the necessary documents and accepting congratulations from the trustees, I found myself alone in what was now my office, the same space where Dad had built his dream from nothing into one of the region's most respected development companies. I ran my fingers along the edge of the desk, remembering sitting across from Dad as a child, watching him work and dreaming of being just like him someday. The path had been far different than either of us had imagined, but somehow, I'd ended up exactly where I was meant to be. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Margaret entered, carrying a small box. I found this while clearing out some old files, she said, placing it on the desk. Your father set it aside for you before he got sick. I think he meant to give it to you himself, but... Inside the box was a simple silver nameplate, Rebecca Morgan, CEO. The date engraved at the bottom was from 8 months before Dad's death. Before his illness, before the changes to his will, before everything changed. He knew all along, I whispered, tracing the letters with my fingertip. I think he was waiting for you to be ready to hear it, Margaret replied gently. He was so proud when you started your own business, proving you had the Morgan entrepreneurial spirit. But he always hoped you'd find your way back here someday. As Margaret left, my phone buzzed with a text message. To my surprise, it was from Jason, the first direct communication in months. Heard the news. Congratulations, I guess. My lawyer says continuing to fight is pointless. I'm moving to California next month. Good luck with Dad's company. The message was hardly warm, but it lacked the hostility of our previous interactions. Maybe, with time and distance, some kind of relationship might be possible again. I typed a simple reply. Thank you. I wish you well in California. The door is always open if you ever want to talk. He didn't respond, but I hadn't expected him to. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. In the year since taking over Morgan Developments, I'd made significant changes while staying true to Dad's core values. I'd established a division focused on sustainable, community-oriented projects. I'd created a charitable foundation in our parents' names that supported affordable housing initiatives. I'd even found ways to incorporate my design background, emphasizing thoughtful spaces that enhanced quality of life, not just square footage and profit margins. My own design business continued operating in Boston, now as a subsidiary of Morgan Developments with a talented team running day-to-day operations. I divided my time between both companies, finding unexpected synergies between development and design. The family home had undergone subtle transformations as well. Instead of the complete renovation Jason and Brittany had planned, I preserved its character while updating what needed refreshing. Mom's garden was thriving again, and Dad's study remained largely untouched, a quiet space where I still felt his presence most strongly. 6 months after taking official control of Morgan Developments, I received an unexpected email from Jason. He'd started a small real estate business in Los Angeles and was struggling with some aspects of operations. Would I be willing to offer some advice? It was a small olive branch, but a meaningful one. Our conversations remained strictly professional, but the naked hostility had faded. We would never be as close as we might have been without the inheritance conflict, but we were finding a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than childhood ties. To my surprise, Jason eventually asked if he could come work at Morgan Developments again, this time starting in an entry-level position and working his way up legitimately. No special treatment, he'd said during the call. I want to earn it this time. I agreed, with clear expectations and boundaries. Whether this represented genuine growth or simply pragmatism on his part remained to be seen, but it felt like the right decision, one Dad would have supported. As the 2-year anniversary of Dad's death approached, I found myself in his study late one evening, looking through old photos and reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 24 months. From believing I'd lost both my father and any connection to my childhood home, to sitting here as the owner of that home and the leader of his company, the transformation still felt surreal at times. What had begun as a painful inheritance battle had become the most profound growth experience of my life. I'd discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed, healed misunderstandings that had shadowed my relationship with Dad for years, and found a purpose that combined my own passions with our family legacy. I picked up a framed photo of Dad from his desk, one from the groundbreaking of his first major project. His face shone with pride and determination, the same expression I'd seen in my own reflection recently after completing a challenging negotiation. I get it now, Dad, I said quietly to the empty room. It was never about the house or the company. It was about earning what matters, valuing what's truly important, and building something that lasts beyond ourselves. The most valuable inheritance hadn't been the material assets, it had been the values, work ethic, and vision Dad had modeled throughout his life. Jason had spent years focusing on what he thought he deserved to be given, while I had inadvertently followed Dad's example by building something of my own. In the end, the lawyer's revelation had changed everything, but not in the way any of us had expected. It had forced Jason to confront his entitlement, pushed me to embrace a legacy I thought was close to me, and honored Dad's deepest wish, not just for his company to continue, but for his children to become the best versions of themselves. I placed the photo back on the desk and smiled, feeling Dad's presence in the room, in the house, in the company that bore our name, and most importantly, in the values that now guided my own life and leadership. Some inheritances can be measured in dollars and deeds. But the most valuable ones, the ones that truly change us, are measured in lessons learned, challenges overcome, and the wisdom to recognize that what we earn through our own efforts will always be more precious than what we're simply given. If you've ever faced family conflict over inheritance or been underestimated by those who should have believed in you, I hope my story resonates with you. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as disappointments, and the paths we never expected to walk lead us exactly where we need to be. Leave a comment below sharing your own experiences with family dynamics or unexpected life turns. And if this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes, life's most painful moments can become our greatest opportunities for growth. Thank you for listening to my journey.